Welcome to the PopDoc podcast. We have with us filmmaker Josh Izenberg, the director of SLOMO. A couple of years ago in 2013, it won Best Short Doc at South by Southwest, and I really just enjoyed the film. So thanks for coming on today, Josh.
Yeah, thanks, Dugan. Appreciate PopDoc hosting SLOMO.
I'll ask you what I ask most people up front is, how did you meet the character of your film, Dr. John Kitchen?
Yeah, sure. So through my dad. My dad's a doctor, and he went to med school with John Kitchen at I think it was Wake Forest in North Carolina back in the late 60s, I believe, early 70s. And they hadn't really kept in touch. My dad was in, flash forward 2011 or so, maybe 2012, and he was walking down the boardwalk in San Diego, and John Kitchen, his old classmate, rollerblades by him on one leg. They stop, they're talking for a little bit, and John, aka SLOMO, starts telling my dad about how he sort of radically transformed his life. He's this other guy now. He's found something called the zone. He's sort of devoted himself to rollerblading. And so my dad starts telling me about this guy, this former neurologist who's sort of become this like rollerblading celebrity in San Diego. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. What's this guy's story? I was sort of looking for a project at the time, and I thought, this could be cool. He had written a couple of books, self-published, but I got a hold of one of them and I read it, and I was like, I think there's more to his philosophy than maybe people realize.
The book was on his philosophy?
It was called The Zone. So like a little tiny book called The Zone. And it was one of those things where it's like, I could just tell. I was like, this is one of those things that's going to strike a lot of people as crazy, until they really look into it. And I think this guy has something to say. So I called him, we talked, and my feelings were totally confirmed. I was like, this guy is sort of brilliant, and has something to say about life and the rat race and just everything. We talked about a lot of things. So that kicked it off, and we started working on the project.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. I mean, his philosophy. Or when you start watching it, you don't expect it to go into philosophy, and so and it was inspiring to hear about him talking about being able to just do what you want to do, and how that that could bring happiness. So and getting to meet him, read his book, make the film. How were you inspired by it? Did it change your course or direction at all as a person?
Yeah, I think it confirmed some things for me that, I had recently quit a job working for an advertising firm and sort of struck out on my own. Actually, come to think of it, I was still at the job, but I was sort of on the verge of leaving. And I just wanted to do documentary film, and I was a little bit, nervous about sort of committing to that. And, over the course of working on the project, I left this job, and SLOMO was somewhat successful, and it sort of allowed me to like pivot and sort of do that. So in its own sort of roundabout way, I do think like the project itself, like allowed me to do more of what I want to do. However, at the same time, SLOMO is in his, I think when we were making the film, he's like in his late 60s. So I think some of it is about doing what you want to do at that stage of life. And, obviously when you're in your 30s, 40s, there's just responsibilities that I think he doesn't have to deal with. And I think like I sort of recognized that like, I didn't want to do what he did. I wasn't ready to sort of become some sort of aesthetic, just out there wandering the streets or whatever. I still like, wanted to have a job. I wanted to do the hustle and the whole thing. So,
yeah,
maybe like eventually when I'm older, I'll sort of remember him and similar. So we'll see.
Yeah. With your career, you said you were working in advertising or marketing at the time. Was this your first documentary you'd ever done in terms of, you do docs now?
Yeah, this is the first one. I had done some documentary style work at this marketing brand strategy type place. So I was interested in film prior to that, and I got to pick up a camera and do some projects. Really kind of shoestring, simple projects, but I learned something doing those. But this SLOMO was the first sort of real endeavor, I think, start to finish documentary, where I really kind of put it through the whole production process and gave it, my all, and did the film festival thing and everything. So yeah, that was sort of the debut project for me.
For other filmmakers who are watching this and they submit their doc to film festivals and maybe they get some type of mild success where they get a run, how do you have any advice for them on like how you were able to take this doc and parlay it into the next project?
Um, well, I don't think I totally did. I didn't like leverage it as well as I probably could have. There is a moment if you have a successful project where people will be calling, even with a short documentary now, people will call you. I don't know what to say to that beyond sort of it's good to be ready for that. Um, that said, I felt a lot of pressure to have another project ready to go. And I think that actually caused some problems because I ended up jumping into a couple projects that I don't think were right, just because I was like, okay, this is my moment. And starting a project that's not the right project and investing time and energy into that is counterintuitively, it actually, takes up more time, right? Because you can spend a year, 2 years working on a doc that's just, you maybe always knew wasn't really the right one. So actually, my advice would be like, be patient. Take your time, find the next right project. Don't feel like you have to have something in the hopper immediately. If you do, it's great. If you don't, wait. I wish I would have waited a little bit longer.
So in terms of making the film, what were the biggest challenges you face with SLOMO?
Well, I think there's a logistical challenge of just like how to film him in movement, rollerblading. And, when we started working on now, it's like since 2013 or 2011, when we were filming it, there's a lot of like different kinds of stabilizers and things you can buy to sort of run around with the camera. They're lightweight, but at the time there weren't as many options for that. So, most of the story is taking place while he's literally in movement through crowded people on a boardwalk. And we knew that we just needed to find a way to like keep up with him. And we had a tiny crew and we didn't have a lot of resources. So, we started out hiring this guy with a full on Steadicam to chase him. And it was so physically taxing. The guy got like physically ill just trying to run with this giant. So, we can do that.
He was running. Okay.
SLOMO was moving kind of quickly,
Yeah.
At least on part of his journey. He's going like downhill. So it didn't work. We tried to rig up some sort of bicycle and put the DP on the back of the bike facing backwards. So it took us a long time to come to like the really simple approach of like putting the DP in a pair of rollerblades as well.
Yeah.
With a really simple handheld kind of gimbal that went on his wrist. And that was it. But for some reason, it took like 6 months of thinking about it and trial and error to like do that. Was probably right in front of us. I was on a skateboard behind them both with a boom, microphone. So that was like the physical challenge of it. Beyond that, it wasn't that complex of a production. And then of course there's the perennial challenge of any documentary, especially shorts in some ways, which is like sort of finding the story, figuring out how you're going to tell it in like 15, 20 minutes max. So that was hard. That's applied to every project I've worked on since.
One thing that, really stood out to me was the music. I was like, wow, the soundtrack, especially of a short doc, I was like, this is one of the best soundtracks, honestly, I've heard on a especially short documentary. I
appreciate that.
Yeah. Where did that come from?
I hired 2 musicians who I knew were good musicians and hadn't really done any scores. I would have normally just hired one, but they were very different stylistically, and sort of I needed different things. And one thing I do a lot is I'll sort of temp in some music, like pop music or whatever I like and find, and I'll sit there for a little bit and I'll say, okay, this is the right feel. So when I finally go to a musician, I can say, hey, can we do something folky here or something kind of classical? But really, I worked with Nate Sloan and Nick Gage and are the 2 composers, and they just did a great job with it, and I was lucky. And I've worked with Nick on stuff since. He did the score for a surf film I did after SLOMO, and I'm working with him right now on a feature doc. So it's good to find people. I like, on commercial work, I use a lot of stock music, which is fine, but it's just not the same as having one individual like try to custom create tracks for a film.
Well, very cool. Well, tell us, this film was made, 7, 8 years ago. So what are you doing now and what projects do you have coming out next?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the big thing I did since SLOMO was Resurface, which I co-directed with Win Padula, which is a surf film. It's on Netflix. That was now that's a few years old now, but that took up a lot of the space after SLOMO. Another short, but these shorts for some reason, at least at my pace, they just take years. It's like some people work quicker than I do, I guess. Now I am directing a feature documentary called Town Square, or that's the working title. And it's about a place in San Diego where it looks like it's a city from the 1950s. And it's for people with Alzheimer's dementia to go in there and spend time there and sort of feel like they've gone back in time. Because a lot of times people with these memory illnesses can't really remember the immediate past that well, but they can remember their childhood. So it's sort of like a therapeutic space for them.
Interesting.
So I followed the construction of Town Square, and the CEO, Scott Tardy, sort of one of the central figures in the film. And then we follow a number of families as they're getting ready for Town Square to open, and then what happens once they go there, and what works with it and what doesn't work. And yeah, so that's that's in post-production, and everything is going a little more slowly than with the pandemic, and I can't sit down in a room with the editor right now. We have to do everything remotely, but hopefully it'll be done sometime in 2021, and we get on the old film festival submission merry-go-round and see how that pans out for us.
Well, as we exit here, do you have any words of advice for aspiring filmmakers who are maybe looking to make one of their first documentaries?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, trust yourself. If you think an idea is a good idea, if there's something about it that you gravitate to, don't overthink whether or not the general public is going to like it or not, whether or not it's going to be a success in the on Vimeo or in the festivals or whatever you plan to do with it. Just if it speaks to you and and you can't stop thinking about it, then it's the right idea. And I think that's the ideas that have worked well for me. That's how they came. And every time I tried to sort of overthink what other people would want to see and use that as a starting point, I just feel like it never worked out with the same degree of success. So.
Cool. Well, that served you well with SLOMO, and I'll definitely be checking out your other work on Netflix, etc. So thank you so much, Josh, for coming on and on the interview for the podcast.
Okay. Thanks, Dugan. I really appreciate you having me.